since you've sort of pulled the finger out of the dike and just let me go on the Ross Cameron rant,
No, that's fine.
I will continue on the same theme. And Lucian of Samosata is one of the great literary figures of the ancient world. Indeed, he was a contemporary of Marcus Aurelius. So we're talking about sort of 150, 160, 170 AD. And he was originally, he didn't come from Rome. Samosata, I'm pretty sure, is in Syria. But he was a kind of genius, a very fascinating, interesting life story. No one else in the ancient world refers to him anywhere, but there are very few figures in the ancient world for whom more of their body of work survives. And so we have plenty of Lucian. He's the very first writer of science fiction, in which he wrote a story about a contest between the inhabitants of the moon and the sun. But he's famous. He was a itinerant, sort of ran away from home when he was a boy. Like Socrates, he was the son of a family that made its money making and selling statues of the gods of the period. So he developed a sort of healthy skepticism about the gods and about this human propensity to want to attribute supernatural causes to natural events. And this became a big part of his shtick, was to attack the excesses of the priests and the philosophers, who were seeking to use their power for their own benefit rather than to discover the actual meaning of what was taking place and to benefit the people they were meant to be serving. But Lucian wrote a true story, as it turns out, a story that nearly killed Lucian. And the story goes under several, you'll find it under a number of different titles, but sometimes called Alexander the Quack, or Alexander the Paphlagonian Quack. And it's the story of a guy who created a cult, which turned out to be very highly profitable, in which he was a very, very serious professional in illusion and deception. And he marketed himself as the modern recreation of Asclepius, the mythical ancient sort of god of medicine. And he produced this snake, which he used to bring out in darkened theatres and issue medical diagnostic prognostications to crowds of people who would pay. And he had an army of spies in the sort of cities where he was operating, and they would go into the inns and taverns and listen to the people who had travelled to come to see Alexander the Paphlagonian. And he would then be in a situation where he was already armed with their medical history and their problems before they entered the theatre. And some guy would stand up in the crowd and upon whom he had already been briefed. And he said, "Before you speak, I know that you're here to talk to me about a cure for your wife's infertility," right? The guy would be like, shocked.
Sounds like the ancient version of the what we have today in America with the healers. You know, the showman, in America, where I can God speaking through me, walk. I command you to walk, and it's a miracle. Now give me a donation.
This is exactly what was taking place. And here we go. Wikipedia, if I just pull him up, you've got these multiplicity of names. Wikipedia says Alexander of Abonoteichus, Lucian, Alexander the false prophet, which seems to be Lucian, Alexander, or the false prophet, according to Oxford University. Alexander of Abonoteichus, charlatan and false prophet. Now, the point of this ramble is, the reason I bring it up, is because Alexander was an absolutely real figure. And when Lucian went and studied this phenomenon and then published the story where he revealed the various, he committed the crime of revealing the magician's secrets of the tricks. And Alexander the Paphlagonian had actually entered into an alliance with a couple of local governors where they would support his cult if they got a cut of the money. And indeed, this was all taking place at the time of the Antonine Plague. And the Antonine Plague broke out originally in the military barracks on the perimeters of the Roman Empire. But when the soldiers returned to Rome, they carried it back with them. And that plague lasted for over 20 years. And it was a real plague. And according to some sources, it cost, it may have been 25% of the population of Europe. It almost certainly killed Marcus Aurelius's younger brother, and could easily have killed Marcus himself. Modern sort of students of the history and evolution of pathogens are not quite sure what the pathogen was. Some people think it was smallpox. We don't really know for sure, but it was a real pandemic. And in that environment, there was this heightened sense of fear. And, Alexander actually sold a little sort of plaque that you could put over the door of your house that would allegedly ward off the spirits. And of course, the snake is the snake of Asclepius, who still appears on the insignia of most medical professions, where you see the bloke leaning on the staff with the snake wrapped around it. That's where the imagery comes from. And we still find in the archaeology today, when we are unearthing these Roman villas all over the empire, we find this little phrase which just escapes me, but you can find if you go back to Lucian, on the doors of these fearful, desperately fearful people looking for some kind of a vaccine, some sort of medicine man, some quack theorist who's going to protect them from this sort of existential fear of the pathogen. In the case of the Romans, they actually had genuine reasons to fear the pathogen, whereas we, under the influence of very stupid people like, Scott Morrison, Greg Hunt, the Armenian chick, what's her name again? Premier of New South Wales, completely forgettable individual who was as fearful, Gladys Berejiklian, as fearful as the daft supplicants, in the theatres of Alexander the Paphlagonian.